He was barefoot, drinking sweet tea on my porch swing, wearing my flannel shirt, and when I asked who the hell he was, he smiled and said, "I live here now." The swing creaked. The mug in his hand? My wife's. And that was the moment I realized the HOA had stolen my damn cabin. Back when we first bought the cabin, it was nothing but a leaky box with wood rot, mouse poop in the cabinets, and a dock that looked like it was holding itself together out of sheer memory. My wife, Ellen, saw it on a whim during a Sunday drive, just a crooked old place tucked into a cove off Lake Carlisle, and said, "This could be ours." I told her she was out of her damn mind. She told me to trust her. So I did. We put in nights, weekends, our first decent tax return. I handled the heavy lifting, roof beams, wiring, a composting toilet that gave me nightmares, and she handled the life part. Curtains, mugs, a wood-burned sign that said Palmer's Peace. We didn't have kids back then, just big plans and a mutual love of places that smelled like cedar and wet leaves. She died 8 years ago. Breast cancer. Quiet. Brutal. I kept the cabin exactly how she left it. Never had the heart to change a single thing. Her slippers stayed under the bed. Her fishing rod still hangs on the wall with a crooked nail. I'd go there to be still, not mourn exactly, just to remember who we were when the world still felt full. After she passed, I retired early. Forestry work was all I'd ever known, counting trees, checking soil health, yelling at 20-year-olds with chainsaws. The job kept me moving, and then, just like that, it didn't. I traded that in for morning coffee on the porch and long days with a hammer or a paintbrush, fixing things not because they were broken, but because it felt good to bring order to something. Then my sister got hurt, slipped on a patch of ice outside her condo in Portland, cracked her pelvis in 2 places. She lived alone, had no one nearby. So I packed up the truck, left my cabin locked tight with a checklist duct taped to the fridge, and headed west with a bag full of flannel shirts and a thermos of soup. I thought I'd be gone 3 weeks. Maybe 4. Turned out to be half a year. Surgeries, physical therapy, bad insurance, and too much pride to hire help. I stayed because that's what you do for family. Checked in with a buddy back home. Old Joe, neighbor, cranky as a raccoon, but he's got a good heart. I asked him to swing by the cabin once a week, just to make sure no bears moved in or the roof hadn't peeled off again, and I didn't think twice about it after that. Until I came back. That day was supposed to be quiet. Drive in, drop off my bags, maybe sit on the dock and fall asleep with a book I wouldn't finish. I missed that place like people miss a person. I craved the creak of the boards, the whistle of the kettle, the way the wind came off the lake and blew straight through your soul. But instead of peace, I pulled into the drive and found a white SUV I didn't recognize and a man with a man bun, shirtless, wearing what looked suspiciously like my flannel button-down, talking loudly on a Bluetooth headset like he was closing a real estate deal. And when I asked who he was, he just smirked and said the words that kicked this whole damn story into motion. "I'm Travis. My mom's the HOA president. She gave me the place." I didn't make a scene. Not then. I don't know if it was the shock or the fact that Travis looked so absurd sitting there with his bare feet up like he was king of some lakeside kingdom, but I just turned and walked back to my truck. Didn't say a damn word. My hands were shaking, but I kept it cool. Drove a few blocks up the road, parked near the edge of the HOA's little office building. They called it the Welcome Lodge, which always made me laugh, considering how unwelcoming that place felt, and just sat there, engine ticking, heart punching my ribs. The swing he was sitting on? My granddad built that by hand back when men still used dowels instead of nails. The pines around the cabin? I planted those with my wife the summer after we bought the place. That land, those boards, even the coffee mug Travis was sipping out of. That place held 20 years of my life, and someone had just given it away like it was a leftover garage sale sofa. I didn't know how or why or what kind of crooked magic was involved, but I knew one thing. Karen Dwyer had finally lost it. She'd always rubbed me the wrong way ever since the HOA started up a couple years back. Some of the neighbors were excited. "We'll have standards," they said. "No more junk cars, no noisy weekends." And for a while, sure, it was harmless. A newsletter, a suggestion box, even a community potluck where someone made brownies with actual pine nuts, which I don't recommend, by the way. But then Karen got elected president. And suddenly, everything was rules. You couldn't have shutters unless they matched the neighborhood palette, whatever the hell that was. No outside drying racks, no non-regulation lawn gnomes, which, yes, was an actual phrase she used during a meeting. She once sent old Joe a formal warning for leaving his trash bins out past noon. And the way she walked around, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, always in some sort of expensive blazer like she was heading to argue zoning codes on Capitol Hill. Even at the lake, even in July. Still, I stayed out of it. I was polite, always waved, even helped her one time when she locked her keys in her car. Figured better to be kind and keep your head down, let people feel important if they need to. I wasn't looking for a fight. But now she'd crossed a line so far, I couldn't even see the fence anymore. I went home that night and dug out every document I had. Deed, property lines, tax receipts, utility bills in my name. I had it all in a folder marked cabin docs that I kept in the safe. My name was on everything, and there wasn't a single thing in there that said Travis Dwyer. The next morning, I took those papers straight to the HOA office. Karen wasn't there, of course, just her assistant, a kid named Devin, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I asked for Karen, and he said she was in a strategic planning retreat. I asked what that meant, and he just blinked like I'd asked him to explain nuclear fusion. I left my contact information and a copy of my deed, told him to tell her I wanted a meeting. No yelling, no threats. Just a man trying to understand how someone gave away his house. 2 days later, I got a letter. Not an email, a real paper envelope with the HOA logo and my name spelled wrong. Mr. Palmer was now Mr. Palman. Inside was a typed signed letter from Karen Dwyer herself, saying that the property had been reevaluated, determined to be uninhabited and structurally unsafe, and therefore reallocated under HOA Emergency Ordinance 6.3. No date, no photos, no inspections attached. Just a one-page letter and her signature with a little loopy flourish at the end like she was proud of it. That was the first violation, the moment where it went from annoying oversight to real, tangible theft. That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a clerical error. This was a hit job, and I was the target. I looked at that paper and felt my jaw tighten. Because here's the thing, there's only one kind of person who pulls a move like that. The kind who thinks no one's going to fight back. The kind who sees someone quiet and takes that as permission to push. What Karen didn't know yet was that I don't push back loud. I push back deep. I don't know what I expected after that letter. Maybe a follow-up meeting, some sort of HOA mediation, even just a phone call where Karen tried to smooth things over with that tight little smile she used when she thought she was being charming. What I didn't expect was to drive up to the cabin and find my mailbox ripped out of the ground. Not knocked over, not damaged by accident, I mean gone. Just a dirt hole and a chunk of broken post like it had been yanked out with a damn winch. And taped to a nearby tree with bright orange painter's tape was another letter from the HOA. Mail service discontinued due to disputed property status. I stood there for a while, hands on my hips, trying to process it. There's something deeply surreal about watching your own life being quietly erased, piece by piece. First it was a swing, then a mug. Now, my mailbox. What's next? My name scrubbed off the property records like I was never there? That's when I called Rick. Rick's an old friend. Ex-military guy turned real estate attorney, and more importantly, someone who owed me a favor after I helped him clear an acre of pine beetle-infested land behind his dad's house a few years back. I explained what was going on, slowly, calmly, and he got quiet for a beat. Then he said, "Yeah, I've heard of stuff like this. You need to start documenting everything, every interaction, every letter. Take pictures. This isn't an HOA issue anymore, it's a land grab." I started doing exactly that. Every letter went into a binder, every interaction was recorded, even if it was just me talking into my phone like some lunatic in a truck cab, and the more I looked, the worse it got. They had redrawn the property lines, I mean literally. A new map, with new lot numbers, filed while I was gone. Suddenly my 2-acre plot had been subdivided, and the cabin sat on what they were now calling Lot 42A, which coincidentally was newly assigned to Travis Dwyer. The rest of my land, marked as unallocated common space, just stripped right off like old paint. The paperwork was sloppy, no county seal, just a rubber stamp from the HOA with Karen's signature and a date that didn't line up with any public records. But that didn't stop them from putting up stakes around the place. Real, actual survey stakes, like they were planning to pave a damn golf course through my childhood memories. So I built a fence, not a cute little picket fence either. I ordered steel posts and black powder-coated panels, tall and sharp enough to make a coyote think twice, and I didn't just put it around the cabin. I extended it right along the edge of the so-called common area, cut across the access road, and just for poetic balance, wrapped it around the HOA office building itself. I even left a narrow path wide enough for a lawnmower, just to stay technically compliant. I didn't announce it, didn't ask permission. I just showed up with a delivery truck, 2 guys who worked for cash, and a quiet determination that had been aging in my gut like whiskey in a barrel. Karen noticed, though. Oh, she noticed. She came stomping out of that little office in her pressed khakis and a lavender blouse like she was storming a courtroom. Her voice carried down the road. "You can't do this. You're obstructing a community access point." I held up my blueprints, originals, stamped, notarized, and blessed by the county 2 years prior. "Yes, Karen," I said, calm as a monk. "I can." She turned the color of week-old ketchup, screamed something about legal action, threatened to involve the board, and then, just as I expected, she escalated. The next morning, a black SUV pulled into my driveway. A guy in a cheap suit and wraparound sunglasses stepped out holding a clipboard. "You Mark Palmer?" he asked. I was holding a mug of coffee and still wearing the same jeans from the night before. I nodded. He flipped the clipboard around. "Cease and desist. From the HOA board. You're being cited for obstruction, unauthorized construction, and aggression." Before I could say a word, Travis came flying out of the cabin, barefoot, waving a hammer like he was in the middle of a frontier standoff. "You can't take this place from me," he shouted. "My mom promised me." The guy with the clipboard just turned and looked at him like he was a raccoon on meth, then back at me. That was the moment. The crack in the glass. Travis had just admitted in front of a third-party witness that he knew the place wasn't legally his, that he was acting on a promise, not a deed, not a contract, a promise. And that little slip-up, that changed everything. But I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just sipped my coffee and walked back into my truck, heart pounding. Because now I wasn't the crazy guy with a fence and a vendetta. Now I was a victim, with evidence and witnesses. And Karen? Karen had just fired the shot that was going to bring down her whole empire. I really did try to be reasonable. I know how it might sound, with the steel fence and the blueprint stunt and everything, but honestly, I wanted this to end like adults. Quiet handshake, mutual agreement, papers signed. Done deal. No drama, no burned bridges, just a return to what was mine, and a nice cold beer on the porch swing that Travis hadn't yet managed to break. So I started with the county office. I drove down there with every document I had. Deed, plat map, tax receipts, photos of me and Ellen putting in the dock 15 years ago. I even brought a Christmas card from 2009 with a photo of us standing in front of the fireplace because, hell, it proved we were living there before Travis was out of high school. The clerk at the counter was polite, in that government office sort of way where they smile, but you know they've already stopped listening. She flipped through my paperwork, tapped a few keys, and said, "We're showing a recent change of ownership. Lot 42, A. Deed transfer on file, notarized." My stomach dropped. "May I see it?" I asked. She printed it without hesitation, and there it was. My name, signed in blue ink, just one problem. I didn't sign it. I hadn't signed anything, ever. The signature looked like mine if you squinted, maybe if you held it up to the light and were drunk. But I've signed my name on 1,000 tree assessments, payroll forms, and retirement filings, and I don't loop my R like that. Ellen used to tease me about how blocky my handwriting was. This one looked like a script font from a wedding invitation. I took the copy to Rick. He barely glanced at it before whistling through his teeth. "That's a forgery." "You sure?" "Positive. Whoever did this didn't even bother to match the pen pressure. Look, your real signature has weight behind it. This one's floaty. It's lazy." That word hit me hard. Lazy, because that's what this whole thing felt like. Not just a betrayal, but an insultingly sloppy one. They didn't expect me to push back. They figured I'd roll over, maybe yell into the void for a week, then disappear. Rick leaned in. "If we can prove the forgery, we can file a quiet title action. It'll reaffirm your legal ownership, but we'll need to move fast before they try something else." I nodded. "Do it." We filed that same week. Meanwhile, I tried talking to the board directly. I showed up to a community meeting with my binder in hand. Karen wasn't there. Scheduling conflict, according to Devin, who looked like he'd aged 10 years since the last time I saw him. But the rest of the board sat at their little folding table like they were running a city council. I calmly explained the situation, that I had proof of ownership, that the deed was forged, that Travis had publicly acknowledged the property wasn't his. I didn't yell, I didn't accuse, I just laid it out. One of them, Judy, I think, shifted in her seat and asked if I'd be willing to let the board review it privately. I told them I'd already submitted everything to the county and my attorney. That got their attention. One of the men, Roger, muttered something about legal exposure, and they wrapped the meeting 5 minutes later without even addressing the rest of the agenda. So I figured maybe the pressure's working. I tried another angle. I put together a small packet, photos of the cabin through the years, copies of every tax bill paid in my name, a letter explaining what had happened, and mailed it to every house in the community. No big speech, no call to action, just a quiet note at the end that said, "If this could happen to me, it could happen to you." A neighbor. Some people ignored it. A few wrote me back. One older couple from the far end of the lake left a plate of cookies on my truck hood with a handwritten note that said, "We're with you." But Karen? Karen doubled down. Rick got a letter from her lawyer the following week claiming I had harassed a member of the community, Travis, constructed an illegal barrier, my fence, and was in open violation of HOA standards related to tone, conduct, and decorum. Tone and decorum. They were trying to outmanners me. The next hit came fast. A complaint was filed with the county assessor's office accusing me of bribery, implying that the assessor who had reaffirmed my property lines had been influenced somehow. It didn't stick, but it put enough doubt in the system that my title confirmation stalled. Then came the restraining order. Karen filed it herself. She claimed I threatened her with construction tools during a confrontation at the fence line. I wasn't even there when she showed up that day. I was at Rick's, going over documentation. But it didn't matter. The claim alone triggered a temporary order. I was told to stay at least 100 feet from her residence, the HOA office, and her immediate family, which included Travis, which meant I couldn't go home. That night, I sat in the parking lot of the town diner, staring at my folded-up sleeping bag in the back of the truck, wondering how the hell I'd gotten here. I wasn't angry, not really. I was tired, bone tired, the kind of tired that starts in your ribs and settles in behind your eyes. Everything I'd done, every legal filing, every polite letter, every careful explanation, had been met with either silence or counterattack. I called my daughter, Lauren. Didn't tell her everything, just enough. She offered to come down, even said I could stay with her for a bit, but I told her no. "This is my fight," I said. She paused, then said, "Just don't let them break you." I promised I wouldn't. But between you and me, that night in the truck, staring out at the dark parking lot, I felt close. Closer than I'd ever been. The weird thing about rock bottom is that you don't always know when you've hit it until something lifts you out, and suddenly you realize how deep you were buried. For me, it started with a knock on the truck window just past midnight. I was half asleep in the parking lot behind Old Joe's bait shop, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled faintly like pine cleaner and diesel. I jumped like I'd been shot, heart hammering, and saw the silhouette of a man in uniform standing outside. Sheriff Donnelly. We went to high school together, though he still had all his hair, and I looked like I'd been chewed up by the last 10 months. He didn't say much, just asked if I had a minute and slid into the passenger seat without waiting. I blinked at him, still groggy, and said, "Unless you're here to arrest me for breathing near HOA property, sure." He didn't laugh, just pulled something out of his coat pocket, a small, beat-up flash drive sealed in an evidence bag. "This was found in Travis Dwyer's car," he said, "parked behind the marina, slumped over the wheel, looked like he'd been crying, probably drunk, too." "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated. "Label says HOA 2021. We can't open it without a warrant. But you're not law enforcement." I looked at the drive, then at him. "You sure you want me opening this?" "I'm not here," he said, and got out of the truck. I didn't wait. I drove straight to Old Joe's place. He still had that ancient Windows laptop from 2005 with stickers all over it and keys missing. I plugged in the drive, held my breath, and opened the folder, and then I stopped breathing altogether. There were files, dozens of them. PDFs, scanned invoices, checks, internal memos. At first glance, it looked like boring HOA accounting junk, landscape maintenance, community lighting, legal consultations. But the amounts didn't make sense. The vendors didn't make sense. One law office turned out to be a tanning salon 2 counties over. Another listed address was an abandoned auto repair shop. Then there was a document labeled Lakefront Development, Phase 2. It outlined a timeline for transitioning 10 private lots into common assets, with vague language about noncompliance and involuntary easement reassignment. My name was on it. So were 3 others, 2 of whom I knew, older folks who'd mysteriously sold and vanished months earlier. One folder had scans of quitclaim deeds with different names and dates, all signed by the same notary, a woman who, when I Googled her, turned out to have retired 5 years ago. But her seal was still being used. There was a spreadsheet marked Karen, personal, and that's when I saw the real hammer drop. Money. Real money. Transfers from HOA accounts to businesses with names like Sunrise Consulting and Community Efficiency Partners, all traced to shell companies registered under aliases linked to Karen's old address. Some of them bounced through 3 banks before disappearing. It was fraud, bold, shameless, and buried under layers of HOA jargon and made-up vendors. And Karen hadn't just gone rogue. She had a plan, a whole operation. And Travis, he was just the first piece, a trial run, a test case, I sat there for a long time, fingers cold, chest tight, just staring at the screen. The old laptop fan wheezed like it was overwhelmed too. Karen wasn't just pushing people around with rules and fake notices. She was stealing property, reassigning it, liquidating what she could, laundering the rest, and using her position to give it the shine of legitimacy. And nobody had stopped her because nobody had looked, because most people were too busy or too tired or too polite to dig. I copied everything. Twice. Saved one to a USB I wore on a keychain. Emailed the other to Rick. Then I printed off a handful of the clearest documents, the ones with forged names, the fake business invoices, and the memo about Phase 2, and slipped them into a plain envelope. That Sunday morning, while the lake still steamed in the cool air, I walked from house to house, dropping that envelope into mailboxes. No note, no name. Just the facts. The truth, printed in black ink and clipped in neat stacks. The next time I drove past the HOA office, there were 3 people standing out front reading them. By the next day, there were 20. And Karen? Karen was nowhere to be seen. But I had a feeling she knew the storm was coming. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, those days were behind me, but from something else entirely. Focus, that locked-in kind of energy you get when your blood goes cold and clear and your mind starts stringing pieces together faster than your hands can catch up. The fraud wasn't just real, it was layered, intentional. Karen hadn't just bent a few rules or siphoned money for spa days. She'd created an entire ecosystem of fake vendors, ghost signatures, reassignments, and backdoor land transfers. And now, with that flash drive in my hand and a community full of curious, newly skeptical neighbors, I finally had what she didn't. A reason for people to start listening. But information alone doesn't win anything, it just rattles cages. If I was going to take this thing down, if I was really going to root her out and burn the rot clean, I needed a plan. A real one. Not just angry letters and fences and late-night truck sleeping. I needed to hit her in the one place she wasn't expecting. Her own damn playbook. So I started from the beginning, my dad's old property sketches. He kept them in a warped leather notebook in the pantry. That little book was full of precise, obsessive notes. Boundary markers, tax lot references, tree lines, even notations like view of sunrise starts here. He'd drawn it not for resale or legal defense, but because he cared. That land wasn't just dirt to him, it was something sacred. He mapped it like someone maps a loved one's face. I scanned every page, organized it into folders. Then I gathered every receipt, every notarized transaction, every dated photo that put me on that property over the last 25 years. Pictures of Ellen staining the porch. Me with a fish so big it barely fit the frame. Lauren climbing the pine tree that's now taller than the damn roof. I even had a receipt from when we bought the swing hardware, the same swing Travis had claimed was his. Once that was done, I called Rick, told him we were done playing defense. He met me at the diner that afternoon with 2 cups of black coffee and a yellow legal pad already half filled with notes. "You want this public or legal first?" he asked. "Both," I said. So we split it. On the legal side, Rick filed a formal motion to challenge the forged deed. It would initiate a forensic review of the signature and call for a temporary halt on any HOA authority over disputed property transfers. We'd also request a judge to freeze HOA spending, especially discretionary funds, until the investigation concluded. On the public side, I got to work on the neighbors. I printed clean, organized evidence packets and hand-delivered them to every house that still had a mailbox. I wrote a new note, this time signed, Mark Palmer, Lot 17, the cabin they tried to erase. It ended with a simple question. What would you do if they came for your home next? That one line was all it took. Over the next few days, neighbors who'd been quiet started nodding at me when I passed. I got invited onto porches I'd never stepped foot on. One man, Jeremy, quiet as a stone, Vietnam vet with a long beard and longer memory, told me, "She fined me for a flagpole I've had since '89. He pulled out the ticket from a drawer. HOA violation number A37, unapproved height and placement. It had been stapled to his door. I started collecting stories. Dozens of them. All backed by documents and signed notes. One neighbor had paid a $600 fine for parking his trailer too close to the curb, on his own gravel. Another got threatened with lien proceedings over non-compliant outdoor lighting because her porch bulb was too bright. And the best part? A woman named Missy. Missy Jones used to be the HOA's bookkeeper, got quietly pushed out last year after budget discrepancies. She'd been sitting on a stack of old files in her garage, said they made her uneasy, but she didn't know what to do with them. I didn't even need to ask. She handed them over. Originals, with handwritten notes in the margins, Karen's handwriting. It was gold. That's when I called Lauren, told her everything. She didn't hesitate. Took a week off work, drove down, and spent 3 straight nights scanning files, color-coding accounts, and cross-referencing vendor names. She had this look in her eyes, same one Ellen used to get when she was laser-focused on a project. Watching her work made me realize just how far this had all gone, how far they had pushed us. By the end of that week, we had a full digital archive. We had documents proving fraud, fake business names, illegal transfers, and internal communications that outlined something worse. A plan to expand the scheme to at least 5 more properties by the end of the year. Mine had been the test balloon. The others, mostly seniors, mostly people who didn't have family close by. Karen was counting on silence, and that, right there, was going to be her biggest mistake. We called Janet. Janet McBride was an investigative journalist and, by some twist of fate, my late wife's best friend back in college. We hadn't spoken in years, but Lauren had tracked her down. She picked up on the first ring. I told her the gist of what we had. She didn't even ask for a pitch. "Send it all," she said. "Everything. If it's half as real as it sounds, this could be a statewide story." While Rick handled the legal grenades and Janet prepped her report, I did one more thing. I threw a potluck. Old-fashioned, handwritten flyers. No HOA approval. No permits. Just a meet-up at the community picnic area down by the lake. I brought firewood and paper plates. Someone else brought deviled eggs. There was beer. There was cornbread. And when the sun started going down and the fire cracked high enough to hear it across the water, I stood up and raised my hand. I didn't shout, didn't preach. I just held up a folder and said, "This isn't just about my cabin. It's about what happens when people stop paying attention. They thought I wouldn't fight. They thought we wouldn't care." Then I passed out copies. Let the paper do the talking. By the end of the night, 3 people offered to testify. One man gave me a list of previous HOA board votes that had mysteriously never been documented. A woman offered to bring her nephew, an accountant, for a second opinion. And just like that, the silence cracked. Karen had spent years building a kingdom out of rules and fear. I was building a bonfire out of truth and neighbors. And this time, I had the whole damn neighborhood ready to light the match. I'll tell you the truth, I was nervous as hell. That morning, the one where everything was finally set in motion, I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the guy staring back. Not because I looked different, though I definitely lost some weight and hadn't slept more than 4 hours in a row in months. It was something else, something in the eyes, that tired but determined look you see in soldiers and firefighters and dads driving overnight to rescue a stranded kid. I had nothing left to lose. That's what made it so damn dangerous for them. The counterattack didn't begin with fireworks. It started with a phone call. Janet's voice came through the line like a strike of lightning wrapped in velvet. Story drops Friday, front page. She'd spent 2 weeks verifying every document we gave her, cross-referencing quotes, tracing the shell companies, even confirming the notary was dead and buried in Idaho. Her editor greenlit a full feature. Headline read, "HOA hijacked, inside the scheme to steal lakefront property, 1 lot at a time." The article hit like a sledgehammer. By noon that Friday, the HOA phone line had crashed. Their email inbox was over capacity. Rick called to say a local news crew showed up outside the HOA office before lunch. Karen wasn't there. Nobody was. The door was locked and the blinds pulled tight. I'd expected some panic, maybe even a resignation. What I didn't expect was for Karen to double down. Later that day, I got served with a fresh lawsuit. From the HOA, they were accusing me of orchestrating a smear campaign, violating community harmony, and defamatory action resulting in financial loss. They even threw in public endangerment, which made me laugh out loud, because apparently organizing a potluck now counted as terrorism in Karen's world. Rick wasn't laughing. He said it was a classic scare tactic. Keep me busy in court, drain resources, stall momentum. But here's the thing about fighting clean for too long. You learn every angle they'll try when they play dirty, and this time I was ready. Rick filed a motion to dismiss the suit the same day. Attached to it, a 100-page exhibit of evidence, financial fraud, forged documents, false filings with the county, and a neatly indexed list of every person Karen had targeted over the last 5 years, complete with sworn statements and receipts. And while the court was chewing on that, we hit the board. See, HOA boards are supposed to follow procedure, meeting notices, public records, documented votes, all that. But under Karen's little regime, everything had gotten real casual. Decisions made in parking lots, votes taken over text message, money moved without approvals. So when I gathered 10 homeowners, all pissed off and newly informed, and we showed up to the next official board meeting, things got interesting. The room was tense, folding chairs packed tight, everyone whispering. Karen didn't even show. Instead, Devin sat up front with a clipboard and sweat patches blooming through his shirt. He tried to open with some boilerplate, but I stood up. Quiet, calm. I asked to read a statement. He stuttered, tried to deny it, but the others insisted. I laid it out. The fraud, the forged deed, the false vendor invoices. I passed out copies. I held up Janet's article. I named every neighbor who'd been targeted, and then I asked for a vote. A vote of no confidence, I said, in Karen's leadership, in this board, in this HOA dot. It got loud, really loud. Some folks were angry, others were scared. A few tried to defend her, said maybe we misunderstood, maybe it was all just an accounting issue. But the majority, they were done. They'd seen too much. By the end of that night, 5 of the 7 board members had agreed to step down. Devin resigned on the spot. Judy left in tears. The other 2 tried to hang on, but the room turned cold. We didn't disband the HOA, not yet. That wasn't the point, not then. We needed time, a cleanup, a full audit, new elections, transparency. Meanwhile, the county called Rick. The DA had opened an inquiry. The forged deed, the fake notary, the property transfers, it had reached their radar now. Real charges, real consequences. And Travis? Travis cracked. He left a voicemail on my phone, mumbling through tears that he didn't know it had gone that far, that Mom said it was legal, and that he was sorry. Then he disappeared. Moved out of the cabin the next morning. Left behind the swing, the mug, even the toolbox I'd lent him when I thought he was just some confused kid. Funny thing is, I didn't even feel angry, not at him, not anymore. He was a pawn. Karen was the player. And now, the game was over. But it wasn't enough to just beat her. I wanted the truth in the sunlight, where it belonged. Because I knew Karen still had one play left. She always did. It all came crashing down on a Tuesday. The courtroom wasn't even half full. Small town, small county, not the kind of place where HOA corruption normally made headlines. But the air felt heavy. I could feel people watching me when I walked in, some nodding, some avoiding my eyes. I wasn't there for revenge. I just wanted the truth on the record, out in the open, where it couldn't be buried under committee minutes and polite smiles anymore. Karen was there. Finally. First time I'd seen her in person since this whole thing exploded. She didn't look shaken. She looked pissed, like the mere act of being held accountable was beneath her. Her lawyer looked like someone who charged by the eyebrow raise. Slick suit, too much cologne, confidence like armor. But Rick was there too, quiet, sharp, and dangerous when he wanted to be. He wore that same ratty corduroy jacket he always did, and he had a thick binder in his lap, tabs sticking out like porcupine quills. We weren't in court for the criminal stuff yet. That would come later, through the DA's office. This was about the civil side, clearing my title, shutting down the forged deed, and putting everything back where it belonged. But it felt bigger, because what came out in that room was more than just paperwork. It was everything. Rick opened with the basics. He was steady, professional, boring even, on purpose, because the facts were loud enough. He showed the original deed, the forged signature, the mismatched notary seal. Then he walked the judge through the paper trail step by step, showing how Karen had manufactured false transfers through shell entities and passed them off as HOA-endorsed redevelopments. He pointed out the illegal votes, the missing meeting minutes, the wire transfers that didn't match any service ever actually rendered. Then he did the thing I didn't expect. He brought up the neighbors. He had them listed, sworn affidavits from at least a dozen people who had either been fined, harassed, or in some cases, evicted under similar shady non-compliance clauses. One of them, Missy, the former bookkeeper, was sitting in the back of the room. When Rick mentioned her by name and explained how she was forced out for questioning financial irregularities, I saw Karen flinch, first cracking the mask, then Janet's article came up. The judge leaned forward when Rick entered it into the record. Public knowledge, independent verification, detailed timelines. Karen's lawyer objected, claimed it was media bias and unsubstantiated opinion. But it was too late. That headline had already traveled farther than any of Karen's lies ever had. The genie was out. I wish I could say the judge slammed a gavel and yelled something dramatic, but it wasn't like that. It was quiet, cold, surgical. The judge looked down at Karen and said, "The level of negligence and possible intent in these filings is concerning, to say the least. You abused a position of trust to orchestrate what appears to be a calculated effort to misappropriate property and funds." Then she turned to me. "Mr. Palmer, your claim is affirmed. The deed transfer is invalid. Full title rights restored. The HOA is hereby restrained from taking any further action against your property, effective immediately." I didn't breathe until she left the bench. But it wasn't over yet. Because while all that was happening, the DA had been watching. They'd been collecting evidence ever since Janet's story broke. And that same evening, word started spreading. Quiet at first. Someone posted on the community Facebook group, then a neighbor texted me a blurry photo taken from behind the county jail. Karen, in cuffs, booked for fraud, forgery, wire misuse, and conspiracy. 4 charges to start, more pending. The photo went viral, well, local viral. Every neighbor who had ever been fined for inappropriate fencing or non-neutral paint tones was suddenly texting me links. People were bringing out old letters from the HOA like war trophies. I got thank you cookies, pies, a bottle of whiskey with a note that said, "Your fence is our freedom." Swear to God, someone had that printed on a t-shirt. The best part, though, was the next board meeting. It was the first one with a new interim board, real neighbors, real people, some of whom had never been to a single HOA gathering before. It was outdoors, under the picnic shelter, with folding chairs and paper agendas. No Robert's Rules of Order, just people talking, listening. I sat near the back, didn't say much, and then someone tapped the mic and said, "Mark, do you have anything you want to say?" I stood up, cleared my throat, and for the first time in a long time, I felt my voice steady. I'm not here to run anything. I'm not here to make rules. I just want to be left alone to fish, fix my dock, and maybe get that porch swing back where it belongs. But if anyone else ever finds themselves up against something like this, don't go quiet. Don't give up. You don't have to burn it all down. Just shine enough light and watch what scurries out. That got a little laugh, a couple claps, no one cheered, but everyone understood. And honestly, that meant more. The lake's quieter these days. Still gets its fair share of weekenders and base boat fanatics, but there's a kind of peace here now that didn't exist before. Not the absence of noise kind, but the peace that comes from not looking over your shoulder every time you step onto your own damn property. I rebuilt the swing. Same spot, same bolts, different chains, stronger this time. Found the old mug in the back of the shed, washed it out, and now it's back in its rightful place on the porch railing, half full of coffee more often than not. Some mornings I sit there before the sun clears the tree line and just listen to the water lap against the dock, birds squabbling in the trees like they're debating HOA fines for chirping too loud. I've seen Travis once since it all came down, ran into him at the hardware store of all places. He was picking up a bag of screws and I was buying wood filler. He looked older, tired in a way that didn't come from lack of sleep, just sort of worn down by choices he couldn't undo. He nodded. I nodded back. We didn't say anything. And honestly, that felt like enough. Karen? Last I heard, she'd struck some kind of plea deal. No jail, but banned from holding any board position again and forced to pay restitution. Her house went up for sale 2 weeks later. Some say she moved to Florida. Others say she's working at a law office in the city. I try not to think about it too much. The HOA didn't dissolve. We talked about it, voted on it, but in the end, we kept it. Just trimmed the fat, set new rules. Elected folks who didn't want the job for power, just responsibility. You know, the kind of people who actually ask what the community wants before sending out a fine for a mailbox being too whimsical. Lauren still calls every week. She helped design the new digital record system for the HOA, which cracks me up. She swore off the lake after Mom passed, but now she's got a standing reservation on the guest bed and claims she'll be up every summer. Says it's for research, but I think she just likes the quiet too. And me? Well, I'm still here, still fixing the dock, still swearing at the squirrels, still finding rusty nails from some long-forgotten project Dad started but never finished. Every so often, I find myself thinking about those days when I thought I'd lost it all, when it felt like the whole system was too big, too rigged, too far gone to fight. But that's the thing about roots. You don't always see them, but they hold on tighter than you think. Sometimes the ground has to shake for the truth to come up. And when it does, you plant something better in its place. So yeah, that's what happened. That's how I lost my cabin, got it back, and accidentally overthrew a mini dictatorship in the process. All because someone sat on my porch swing wearing my shirt. If you'd told me back then it would end this way, I'd have laughed you straight off my property. But here we are. The lake's quiet, the porch swing creaks, and for the first time in a long, long while, I'm home.